Hi friends, welcome back to another true crime episode. I'm Faiza and every week I talk about a true crime story. So if you're interested in true crime, do like and subscribe and let's get into today's case. So I went on Google and I came across this case. Have you heard about the lady killer? It's about a deranged man that just targets young women and he was just killing anyone that he could. He's one of those serial killers that would give you one look and be like, yep, you're next. I'm going to target you next. And he just had no self-control. He killed around 4 victims, all women, hence the name The Lady Killer. And these crimes took place in New York, California, and New Mexico. So let's talk about it. Ricardo was born in 1949. His exact date of birth is not known. He was born in Argentina in a city called Mendoza. I did pronounce that wrong, so I do apologize. So Ricardo spent most of his time in Argentina. He grew up with his family and he was a happy young boy. He was very athletic, very active. He enjoyed moving around. He was interested in swimming, so he did a lot of that. He was running and he also practiced martial arts. He was also very good at sketching portraits of people. And as he grew older, he would travel and sketch people and make money out of it. So he would sit at a bar and he would see a person, he would sketch them, and then he would give them the picture. And some people were so impressed that they would pay him, and other people would just turn him away, you know? And he did that in order to keep traveling. He was a bit of a loner when he became older. He became more withdrawn and he was spending more and more time alone. So Ricardo went to New York in 1970 on a 6-month visa. So at the time he got his visa, there was no prior mental health issues with him and he had no criminal past. However, as he was working as a waiter at the Plaza Hotel, he was beginning to act erratic. He was quite rude to customers, you know. He was engaging in bar fights. He would mug people. He would harass women on the streets by, catcalling in a way that is just too much. He would just say things that didn't need to be said. He was just acting very strangely. So it was time for Ricardo to cash his check from the workplace and he went to a local bank. This is where he met a bank teller named Natalie Brown to be more exact. She was only 19 years old. Before you know it, they were getting to know each other on a personal level. One thing led to another and they started dating. Natalie was living in Long Island at the time and she was living with her parents. Natalie's future plans were to follow in her mom's footsteps. Her mother was a nurse and Natalie was saving up money to go to university to train as a nurse, but it was cut short. Ricardo noticed that Natalie was full of life and she had hopes and dreams. He compared his life to hers. So her parents are hard-working citizens and with him, he is just working a dead-end job, living in cheap rented rooms. And he felt a certain way about that. He felt jealous. He felt like life wasn't fair. So he decided to take matters into his own twisted hands. Ricardo decided to love bomb Natalie. They decided to tour Europe together and Natalie slowly was letting go of her life and her goals and she was all consumed by this relationship. Based on what I've read, I don't blame her one bit because she's only 19 years old. This is her first real relationship and Ricardo was an older gentleman and he decided to take her out of the US and travel the world in order for her to not become a nurse, to keep her all to himself. I think you know where I'm getting at. So when they traveled throughout Europe, Ricardo decided to proposed to Natalie. However, the marriage wouldn't take place and the relationship was far from good. So Natalie and Ricardo go back to New York after the engagement was announced, and she was excited and trying to plan for the wedding. However, Natalie's body was found on the 31st of July in 1971. She was completely beaten and stabbed to death. She was only 19 years old. So without wasting any time, Ricardo was suspected and arrested, and he was sent to a psychiatric hospital. He was under the care of Judith Becker, a psychologist working at the prison at the time. So Ricardo was moved to the psychiatric hospital in New York in 1973 and was given furlough from the hospital on occasion, which means that he was able to leave the hospital and come back. This is when he would show up at Judith's home. She was only 29 years old, and I have no idea how he found out where she lives. Maybe she told him, I'm not quite sure, but he showed up at his own psychologist's home. Some sources do speculate that they were dating at the time and there was a breach of professional conduct, but I'm not quite sure. But he did show up to her home, and this is where he beats her to death. Again, the police suspected Ricardo and he immediately fled. So Ricardo now is in San Francisco. He's avoiding the police and keeping a low profile. And this is where he kills another woman, Barbara Ann Taylor. She was only 28 years old. She was found in 1975, beaten to death. The police suspected that her boyfriend did this. However, a photo of Ricardo was circling around. He changed his identity. However, his appearance was exactly the same. So yet again, in 1977, Ricardo made another run for it, and this time he ended up in New Mexico. This is where he killed 23-year-old Laura Gomez. However, very little is known about this murder. So you will never believe this. Ricardo went on the run for over 20 years. The police couldn't catch him, and then at one point, he felt remorse and he turned himself in. He believed that he had an alternate personality that was capable of killing women that he was intimate with. So Ricardo turned himself in on January 18th, 1994. He has remembered the crime he has committed, and he just didn't want to kill any other person anymore. He said he was terrified of his murderous personality coming back. He knew he would kill again, so he made a stop to it. After being charged with multiple life sentences, Ricardo died in prison from a heart attack. He was only 48 years old. I found some quotes directly from Ricardo regarding the murders he has committed. He said, "I turned myself in to avoid any more killings." He also said, "When I did what I did, I was sick and I hope I could be cured while I'm incarcerated. That's all I have to say." End quote. With Ricardo, my final thoughts are that he was a troubled young man. He had a great start to his life, even though very little is known about his family and his upbringing. I don't know what possessed him to kill the women he was dating, but he didn't kill anyone else, only young women. That's why he was dubbed as the lady killer. We will never know what possessed him to do such a thing. However, murder is wrong. I make these videos in order to bring some light to the victims, and I just don't want them to be forgotten, you know. It's also for educational purposes. So I have been getting comments on whether or not I have permission to make these videos, which I find quite strange. This is information that I have compiled into one video. There were other suspected victims in today's story. Devon Green from Los Angeles was killed in 1981, and in 1983, Jacqueline Bernard, that was 64 years old, was beaten to death in her own home in New York City. He wasn't directly linked to these murders, but DNA was flimsy at the time. So guys, this brings us to the end of today's video. Do let me know who you would like me to talk about next week. I do respond back to comments. Please take care. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.